Hello gamers from around the world, this is Boxenberger, the video game enthusiast from Germany, and I would like to welcome you to a Friday episode of the World of Gaming because, well, happy Halloween. I went trick-or-treating yesterday with the kids, so we had to move this week's podcast to a Friday, but I'm even more excited today to do the podcast because there's plenty to talk about. And I can't wait to do that with you, Dutch. How are you doing, my man?
Yeah, I'm doing well. For some reason, all the balance was out on the audio there, and yours came across unbelievably loud for people. So I've just had to correct that. I hope it's better.
Let's hope so.
Happened there. Yeah,
I don't know.
It was like off the scale, and it was just completely in the red permanently. I don't know what that was all about. Let's hope that fixed it a bit.
Okay.
Audio
issues
in a couple of weeks.
yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens. Indeed.
Yeah.
Whilst fixing the audio issues, let me welcome our awesome community. Big shout out to you guys. Hope you are doing well, and I hope you enjoy the games you play, and of course we are looking forward to discuss a lot of interesting stuff this week with you guys. And of course,
I've got a few games to talk about as well.
And a few games, man, but actually plenty of games. Yeah, so it's gonna be an awesome show today. I can't wait. Even though the Friday evening slot is kind of unusual for us, but that doesn't matter. We have plenty to talk about. But I want to also shout out, of course, our listeners that do listen after the fact, either here on YouTube or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you are listening. We have to apologize, Dutch, briefly to our Spotify and Apple Podcast community. We've had some weird YouTube technical issues that prevented us from uploading last week's episode on Spotify, or the last World of Gaming episode on Spotify, and I tried to fix it. What can I say? I'm not smart enough to deal with YouTube issues. It's like, yeah, whatever. We do hope we will be able to upload this week's episode to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and so on. So apologies for that. But with no further ado, Dutch, let's get into the show and let's talk about the games we play. Indeed. So, Dutch.
Yes.
It is been actually 2 weeks since we had last talked to our community. So we want to hear from everyone here in the chat. What have you guys been playing? And Dutch, what kept you busy?
Yeah, so I think at this point I hadn't quite finished Visions of Mana when we last had a podcast, but I have now finished Visions of Mana. I'm on the post because there's another chapter after the end game, so you've actually got a whole different new chapter after the end game, which is actually story related, so it expands the world a little bit more, opens up a part of the map that was inaccessible before, and there's another final boss there to go against. So that's the last place I left it, was just before that final boss, because I wanted to kind of do a couple of the 100% achievement stuff, like finding the cactus everywhere and things. So I've left it at that part so I can go back and kind of tidy things up before I fight the final boss and get the kill him on hard achievement, which is not going to be easy. Outside of that, and I've absolutely loved it, by the way, I think as it stands right now, Visions of Mana has overtaken Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as my game of the year.
I would agree. I haven't finished it yet, but it is on good track. The further you get into the game, the better it becomes. It is just a phenomenal game. The gameplay is super fun. Once you get the hang of the combat system, the story is fantastic. The characters are great. The world and level design is phenomenal. So I'm having a blast with Visions. Yeah, true that.
Yeah, it's an awesome game, honestly, and it was my first Visions of Mana game, so I'm happy that I was convinced by yourself and Hertog to jump into Mana, because you both absolutely loved it from childhood. So yeah, thank you for that recommendation, much appreciated. And as it stands,
you're welcome.
As it stands, it's my game of the year. There's
Sweet.
not many games left to play of this year that might pip it. As much as I love Astrobot and what I played of the previous one, I don't think Astro's going to take that title. It'll be a fun game, no doubt, and I'll have fun with it. But my game of the year is usually revolve around some form of story game that I've played. It's just that way. Like Crash Bandicoot, as great as that used to be, I would never have put that as a game of the year title contender for me. Just my preferences. And of course, we still got Indiana Jones to come, but I don't believe, as much as that's going to be fun, that will take it away from Visions.
Although the previews say it's going to be a fantastic game, man.
Yeah, so I've heard. Same for Stalker. That might be absolutely amazing, but I just don't envision it overtaking the awesomeness that was Visions of Mana.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see. I might be surprised by a couple of the titles left to come out this year, but we shall see. And I think I'm going to pick up Dragon Age this month. So,
yeah, I highly recommend that. I'll get to that in a second.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens with that. Outside of Visions, of course, like a lot of people, if not most people, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, both campaign, zombies, and multiplayer with awesome friends that we've been playing with. Fanto, well, I don't even think I've played with Fanto yet, but we're going to have to sort that issue out. Esky, with Pat, with Shom, and numerous others. It's been a good laugh. So been playing a bit of zombies as well, and zombies is fun as always. It's hectic as hell. You get absolutely annihilated after like round 15. It just gets ridiculous. And round 19 is ridiculous. 20 even more so. You just get absolutely swamped with zombies. There's a few little things where you can exploit it in the levels. Thanks to Shom for pointing a couple of the exploits out, which is good. Kind of gets the zombies to walk away for a bit so you can get a breather. But yeah, that's super fun. The multiplayer is super fun. There's obviously Nuketown's come out today. Haven't had the chance to play it yet, but after the podcast, I'll be jumping on that for a bit and seeing what Nuketown's all about and getting some double XP weekend in. But when we talk about the campaign, I think it is back to good form for Call of Duty and the Call of Duty campaigns. I like the mixture of some of the stealth levels that we've had, some of the option-based sections in the levels. I like there was an open world map as well that we've played on there with the sniping, a kind of sniper's heaven, should we say, where you get access to kind of dropping bombs on sites and getting air support in and surveying the entire map and taking out kind of certain targets. Building the story a little bit more that way. If you actually explore that map and go to all the different locations on the map, there's a lot of different kind of things for the story that are embedded in audio tapes that they find around the place.
Sweet.
So I like the way that they kind of done that. And of course, then you've got the hub level where you can kind of level up your character and choose new abilities and say, okay, well, now I can have 3 armor as opposed to just the 1. I can add extra ammo. I can have quicker aim down sight speed. I can have more grenades. I can do this, that, the other. You can kind of pay towards that. You can kind of add new areas into the house and upgrade weapons and your abilities. So I like that implementation on there as well. So no, the campaign's absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, it is.
Fantastic. So
yeah, it is. I've been playing that myself. I haven't jumped into the multiplayer yet, but I've been playing the campaign, and I do agree, man. I'm absolutely surprised by how much I do enjoy that campaign. Obviously, it's a Call of Duty campaign, a lot of big set pieces happening, but I do enjoy the story. I haven't finished it just yet, but I think I'm pretty close to the end. I do love the one mission where they dive into zombies, some kind of zombie mode in, what was it called, Embark or something, where you fight zombies and monsters, and it's fantastic, man. It is. That level really creeped me out, which is surprising in a Call of Duty game, right? I had a blast playing that so far. I think I'm pretty close to the end, but I got a little distracted by Dragon Age. So,
I always knew you'd get distracted by Dragon Age. You've been waiting for it.
Well, it is so obvious, right? Anything else you've been playing, man?
No, not so far. No. Obviously, when Call of Duty came out, and because I'd already pretty much done everything on Visions and it was just mopping up the 100%, I was able to kind of go, right, okay, I can drop Visions for a second. I can kind of do the 100% in the background. That's fine. I don't need to be on that constantly now. So I've just been playing and enjoying Call of Duty this last week and making the most of it. And enjoying all the modes, getting used to the zombies and seeing what zombies is about and what we should do and how to play it properly, and the multiplayer and ranking up on that a little bit and having some fun with friends. And then, like you say, the campaign when I'm not getting invited to games because I'm just too influenced here. Every time I try to play the campaign, I get invites to play multiplayer, so I jump on multiplayer instead. So I'll eventually get through the rest of the campaign.
Sweet.
But probably won't be this weekend with Nuketown coming out.
Yeah.
But outside of that, no. Like I say, I'm going to, I think Dragon Age is going to be my next single player game.
Which I definitely do recommend to you, man. Well, let's see. What has the community been playing? Dustin Lambert has been playing Legends of Mana and Brotato. And he says you need a guide for Legends of Mana, or otherwise you get stuck to the point where you can't progress in the story. It's a fun game, though.
For Legends. Right, okay.
H. Julia has been playing Black Ops 6. Yeah. Again, like probably most here in the community. Yeah. It is really good, though. We'll talk about a little bit later about the success of Call of Duty Black Ops and what it's done for Game Pass. Stormplayer has been finishing part 1. The question is of what? And he's been playing, of course, Call of Duty. Lily in the chat has been playing New World, but she's pretty much done with it. The end game is poor, she says. And also a little Call of Duty, of course. Yeah, man. Did we miss someone in your chat?
Yes, a couple. So the Apiarist, now renamed to Agent Galeforce.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. I don't.
He's been playing Dragon Age: The Veilguard, RoboCop, and Brotato.
Oh, RoboCop!
All good games.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Paraf has been playing Black Ops 6 and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Again, 2 awesome games there. Studos has been playing Black Ops 6. And Phantosir has been playing Dragon Age on PlayStation 5 as the frame rate is a little bit more stable.
So, Pyro has been not playing much these last 2 weeks, but he played a little Yakuza 5 remaster. Yeah. And the Ruham has been playing... he says, I've been playing one of the first games that has on the movement called Stranglehold. I've never heard of that game.
I've heard of Stranglehold, but that's an older game, that I'm sure it is.
Okay. All right. Dustin Lambert follows up and said he had to start a 16-hour save in Legends of Mana because I did too many things out of order and it broke the game. Man, that sucks. Play Visions of Mana. You won't run into those troubles there. Fantastic.
Beautiful
Fantastic game. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, the poll in the chat for today's gameplay voted for Call of Duty's Black Ops 6 campaign.
Ooh,
I didn't
nice.
expect that. I thought people want to see Dragon Age, but we can do Call of Duty. People have
I thought
spoken.
I'd recorded Call of Duty gameplay, and I don't think I actually ended up doing that. So everyone's just got Visions of Mana again this week, so I apologize.
Well, see, I don't know. For a couple of months now, my Xbox is acting super weird when I try to record gameplay. It stops all the time. I had to, sometimes after 10 minutes, sometimes after 20 minutes. For whatever reason, it just stops recording and telling me I need a faster drive. And I've tried every USB drive and USB stick I have in my household, and it's definitely not the sticks, because I've been using the same ones for years now, and it's I don't know what it is, but it is super annoying. And the only way to fix it is to actually unplug the console and and plug it in again, and then I can record one clip, and when I start the next one, I'll get the same problem again, and it is
weird.
Super annoying. That's why I have multiple 20-minute clips. But yeah, I lost a lot of gameplay footage due to that on Call of Duty. So we'll switch to Dragon Age a little later. I was a little bit more lucky with Dragon Age recordings. But yeah, it is super weird. Anyway, what have I been playing? Man, of course, I talked about Call of Duty, the campaign. I was out of town for work reasons last week, so I didn't start it when Black Ops came out. I started this Monday, but I'm already, again, I think almost done, maybe 1 or 2 missions left. I'll finish that a little later or over the weekend, and because I got a little distracted by Dragon Age, man. And Dragon Age is fantastic. I'm really, really enjoying my time with that game. It is exactly what I've hoped for. I'm still pretty early in, so it's early impressions, maybe 4 hours now.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, BioWare is back. I know people are hating on that phrase on the socials, but it really feels that way. It looks fantastic. The Frostbite engine does a really good job. The art style is gorgeous. It's colorful. It has a fantastic HDR implementation, super deep black levels, popping colors. And you go from colorful environments into dark and gritty areas, and it just looks absolutely stunning. I'm playing on Xbox. It looks even better on PC, of course. Also, I definitely want to shout out BioWare for releasing the game in a complete state. Yeah, it already has quality and performance mode on Xbox. It has the photo mode, which a lot of AAA games seem to patch.
What engine are they running on?
Frostbite.
You know?
It's Frostbite. It's Frostbite game, yeah. And it does a really good job. The lighting is fantastic. The texture quality is really good, at least when you play in quality mode. Performance mode looks good. It looks good, but you definitely notice when you get close to textures, close to a wall, close to the ground. You can really tell it gets blurry. Digital Foundry did an analysis. It drops down to 500 something p in performance mode. It does that when it gets hectic, and in that case, you don't look close to the ground, though. But still, yeah, performance mode looks okay in motion. You know, it's not like, remember Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where the performance mode wasn't playable. That was definitely like too blurry. I wouldn't say that's the case in Dragon Age, but you definitely lose a lot, and especially when you like take in the scenery and. But in motion, it is okay, not super great, but you can definitely play it that way if you want to. I tend to I go back and forth at the moment, but actually the quality mode, even though it's 30 FPS, but it's a very solid, stable 30 FPS, you get used to it, and you definitely gain a lot in visual fidelity there.
Have you tried it on PC yet?
I have not. It's not Play Anywhere, so I bought it on PC. I bought it on console, so I haven't played it on PC yet. But
it's a shame that it's not Play Anywhere.
Yeah, it is. Play Anywhere should be a standard. Yeah, I agree.
Especially after seeing of all companies, after seeing Square Enix implement that as standard, I would hope other companies start to do it as well. But I know what EA is like, so
yeah, no, but they've done a really great job. I have not encountered a single bug. Nothing. Yeah. It runs good. It no clipping, no. Collision errors, no pop-in, no nothing. It is no bugs. It's fantastic. On a technical level, I really wouldn't argue about the game. If you can deal with 30 FPS, you're in for a visual treat. Fantastic art style. And gameplay-wise, it is awesome, man. Like, the combat is fantastic. You have like 3 classes you can choose. I'm playing as a warrior. I was tempted to go mage, because usually I play mage in these kind of games. But for some reason I went with warrior, and I'm loving it, man. The combat is super smooth. It feels impactful. Like, the way you upgrade the skill tree is awesome. You add like great superpowers that you cannot spam, but you have to use them more tactical. They have a great shortcut menu where you can like also tell your companions to do like their special moves, and it feels fantastic to play. Like, I'm really loving it. You get these across the missions. You often find like certain mini bosses that are super fun. I like that they have 7 difficulty levels. So it's not like easy, normal, and hard or so. You have like set, and you can really like adjust the difficulty just the way you want it. It's the UI is super good, like very intuitive, and great menu to manage your characters, your companions, your skill trees. Like, really good. I'm digging the story, very well written. Like, so far, a lot of these high fantasy RPGs have these kind of complex stories, and usually when I started Dragon's Dogma, I had no idea what's happening in the first 10 hours or so until you really understand the lore and what is happening. That's definitely not the case. Even if you haven't played a Dragon Age game before, you can absolutely follow the story. It's clear what is happening and what's going on, and the story is really good, man. So far. I'm not sure if the game will open up because the 4 hours I've played so far are all very linear levels. Like no open world or open areas. It's like you go on to a mission, linear, follow the corridor, and I actually do enjoy that, man. It's great to not have like this gigantic open world and go anywhere. Yeah, so I finished chapter 3 now, and maybe the game opens up a little later in the game. I don't know, but so far it's a very linear game, but fantastic, man. I can't wait to play more. It was hard for me to put the controller down today. So
Fanto's saying it opens up after the crossroads and you have a hub base for in-between missions.
Okay. I'm not at the crossroads yet. I finished chapter 3. Can't remember what it was called, but
yeah.
So, Infinite Umbra says, is it just me or is there no audio? I do hope there is audio.
No one else has pointed it out, so hopefully it's just Umbra.
I hope that it's just Umbra, which would suck in itself, but... okay, he says he reloaded. Okay, yeah. Good. Whew. No, so man, it's Dragon Age is again only 4 hours, and I know I will be playing that game for 70 to 100 hours. So nice. Still early, but first impressions very strong. And
yeah, I don't mind putting in like that much time into a game, because if I have a look even at Visions, which technically would be maybe it's a 30-40 hour game if you play it normally, I've probably put in close to 100 hours on Visions.
I don't think you can beat Visions in 30-40 hours. I've barely done any side missions, and I'm already 30 hours in or so, and I'm not close to finishing it. By the way, I've also played Visions, of course. I played that on the alley when I was traveling last week. But then I decided to hold off on the game, not because I'm not loving it. Again, it is probably going to be also definitely in my top 2 this year. But yeah, I told you that before. I got the very sad news, or bad news, that I need to go and get a surgery in 2 weeks, and I'll be spending a few days in the hospital, and I need something to play on my alley. And since Dragon Age is not play anywhere, I can't play that on the alley. So I decided to pause Visions for now, continue that then on the alley, and finish that in the hospital, and then and play Dragon Age for now. And I don't regret that, because man, Dragon Age is really good. And you listened to me with Visions of Mana, and it turned out to be your game of the year, right? So listen to me and go get Dragon Age. It is your type of game.
I will. I'm expecting that. I hope I like it as much as you like it, and I do end up putting in lots of time. Like I say, if I love a game, I'll put hundreds of hours into it. I did the same with Final Fantasy Rebirth. I smashed that a bit, loved it. Then I played Visions, and I've smashed that a bit. Any game that I truly love, I don't mind getting sucked into it and just soloing that game and then putting everything on the back burner. So hopefully, when I play Dragon Age, I get the same feeling, and I want to just continue playing, and the story drags us in, and I like the building of the characters and the upgrading. So yeah, it's fingers crossed. I'm glad you're enjoying it so far.
You won't regret it, man, if you get it. I'm sure of it. I know your taste in gaming, so yeah. All right, Dutch. I think that was it for what I've played this week. So let us talk about some actual news, man.
Yeah.
All right. Since we are on BioWare, the BioWare CEO came out. Not the biggest news of the week, but since we are on the subject, BioWare has talked a little bit about the next Mass Effect after releasing Dragon Age, and they said they confirmed that Mass Effect definitely will have a mature tone and photorealistic visuals. That's important for them because Dragon Age went with an art style that I wouldn't describe as photorealistic. It looks phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, right? But it is like little stylized and overall, but they want to have that mature tone and a photorealistic art style and visuals in Mass Effect. So, what are your thoughts on that, man?
Nice. I think at the end of the day, I don't think people are too bothered about its art style to a degree. What they want is a better game than Andromeda. I think a lot of the fans were just let down by not the graphics or the gameplay of Andromeda, but mainly the story. So I think on that side, people are just wanting BioWare to get back into the swing of things with Mass Effect when it comes to the actual story and creating memorable stories like they did with the original trilogy, Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. And people, of course, loved the original trilogy, and people still go back and play the remastered trilogy now as well, because obviously that's fantastic and well done. But Andromeda didn't do that for people, and they kind of want them to get back into their best with that. Now, saying that, Dragon Age is just released. People who have played Veilguard have said this is back to BioWare's kind of best when it comes to the kind of story aspect of it.
So from what I can tell so far, I absolutely agree, man. The writing is great. The way how you interact with the companions and so on, it's definitely BioWare.
Yeah. So that's all you can hope for, is that they get back to that for Mass Effect as well.
Yeah.
And really all they're saying here is kind of implying we went for a different thing for Dragon Age, but kind of just let our audience know we're not doing the same kind of art style that we're doing for Dragon Age for Mass Effect. We're doing more photorealistic for Mass Effect. So I think that's kind of probably why he's come out and said that, is mainly because of some of the people that have seen Mass Effect and Dragon Age and thought, I wonder if they're doing the same thing for Mass Effect and it's the same kind of stylized art style. So I think he's maybe preempting that. In the sales world, that'd be called kind of preempting an objection and overcoming it before it's coming to you. So you're already saying, okay, I know what they're going to say, so I'll get there first. And I think he's just doing that. I think he's just getting there first and saying, listen, Mass Effect's going to be photorealistic and we're going to be concentrating on more of a mature tone. Dragon Age was a little bit different, went a little bit more stylized for that end. So let's see. Like I say, Andromeda was okay, but it wasn't something that a lot of people were too happy about when it comes to the story aspect, or even like there's the woman with the dead eyes on Mass Effect Andromeda, who everybody remembers.
Yeah,
you don't know in the station, it's just dead eye.
I think that listen, Andromeda wasn't that bad of a game. Did it?
It was
connect?
It wasn't the best.
Yeah. It wasn't like the Mass Effect trilogy. The Mass Effect OG trilogy is one of the best trilogies ever made, right?
Yeah.
So Andromeda definitely didn't live up to that, but it was in itself a good game. Not one for the ages, but definitely enjoyable. But it didn't help that it launched with that many bugs, and the eyes you remember, or the facial animations in general, definitely didn't help. If you play it now, it's fine. Yeah, but yeah, when it came out, Mass Effect Andromeda definitely was a buggy mess, and it didn't help. I think if it would have launched in this day and age, people would have been more forgiving, because as sad as it sounds, we are kind of used to getting broken games.
Yeah.
If you think about it, which AAA game comes out and is bug-free? Dragon Age is. But
I think on that though, I think even if it would fit into now, I think it's just that for, like you say, for BioWare standards, the story wasn't one to remember like the original trilogy was. And that's ultimately what they're remembered for. BioWare's remembered more for their stories than they are the actual gameplay in itself. I don't remember the Mass Effect trilogy so much for the gameplay aspect. I do remember it for the stories and the choices and the characters you can bring along with you and the development you can have between them all. And that's what people remember.
Yeah.
The story aspect of the trilogy more so than the gameplay aspect. And that was the thing that got me with Andromeda. People were more bothered about the fact that the story wasn't up to par compared to what BioWare's used to.
Agreed.
So that's ultimately what they need to focus on. So as much as it's great to hear that they're going down photorealistic route, all Mass Effect fans will be more concerned about
story and companions and the connections you build with the characters. And yeah, I agree. Do you think Shepard is coming back?
Possibly. I mean, if they want to do, let's go fan service, get back to our best, one thing we know that will hit or resonate with people is let's bring Shepard back and let's kind of reboot the series.
Yeah.
And I think a reboot of Mass Effect might be the best way forward because much like Halo, going to Halo Infinite, people were like, the story was good, but it wasn't a memorable story. And they could have done so much more with it.
Yeah.
And now we're hearing of Halo is going into reboot territory now. And they're kind of just doing things on a different engine.
Yeah.
And going from scratch there. And a bit like Gears, who were on Gears 5 and could have went to Gears 6, but instead of going Gears 6, they've opted to reboot and start from beforehand with E-Day. And I think these are the best options for all of these franchises, personally, is to, right, what we did in terms of continuing with the series wasn't working the way we hoped it would. People enjoyed the games, but they're not memorable games. So let's reboot it. Let's start again. And let's really recapture what made us great. And I hope all three of those franchises do that. I hope Gears gets that with E-Day.
Yeah.
I hope the new Halo does when that launches on Unreal, etc. I hope that resonates with the OG. And I hope Mass Effect gets back to its roots to BioWare and ultimately is a reboot for the franchise and gets it back into the legendary status that it once was.
I want to add Fable to that list.
Yes. Yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
Good show.
Yeah.
I think the thing with Fable that's a little bit different. I think Fable's the only slightly odd one out as well, because with Fable, it's their first ever. Yes, it's rebooting the franchise, but it's also that studio's first ever attempt at it. So that's kind of a okay, let's see what you can do kind of territory.
Yeah.
Whereas with 343, they've had multiple titles now where it hasn't really panned out.
Yeah. True that.
Gears, the Coalition took over, of course, and they had a couple of titles that were good, but they weren't anywhere near as good as 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Same, like you say, Mass Effect, original trilogy, fantastic. Andromeda, not up to par. So let's see.
Let's see.
We can hope.
Let's see. We can hope.
Like I say, I hope it's a reboot. I hope they just reboot the franchise.
Yeah, me too. I think I'm doing a bold prediction now. I think the story will revolve around bringing Shepard back.
Yeah.
Because from the teaser trailer, the one CGI teaser trailer that we got, you would definitely get those vibes, you know?
Yeah.
That's my prediction. The story of the next Mass Effect is about how they bring back Shepard. H. Julia sends in a super member chat for being a channel member for 9 months now. Thank you so much, first of all, for the continued support. And the super member chat says, I trust you now. I'm downloading Dragon Age, and I am sure you're gonna love it. So definitely hit me up and let me know what you think of Dragon Age. because I'm absolutely loving it. And it gets better the more skills you unlock, like crazy better. It's super fun. Dustin in the chat says Mass Effect 1 is still the GOAT. Yeah, I'm team Mass Effect 2, man. Mass Effect... Listen, man, Mass Effect 1 was a phenomenal game. But 2 was just chef's kiss.
I see these arguments all the time, whether or not it's 1 or 2. I never say 3, but always 1 or 2, that's the argument.
Yeah. I even think 3 was fantastic. I know people hated the ending of the trilogy. But
as a whole, people love the entire trilogy. I think, but the argument has always been between which was best, 1 or 2. It's a bit like, even if you have a thing of Halo and you have a thing of Gears, it's exactly the same argument. Like, you'll never hear someone say Gears 3 was the best Gears. It's always...
Oh, you hear me saying that. You hear me saying, I think Gears 3 was the best.
I love Gears 1 for the original tone it had, but I love Gears 2 more. I think Gears 2 was mine.
I mean, Gears 2... The thing is with Gears... I mean, Gears 1 was great and all, and I love the more darker horror tone, but I played Gears in a very Gears 2 in a very special time in my life, so I hold it very dear for that reason. But 3, it was just... No spoilers here, but the moment halfway through the story, like, man, I had to put the controller down. It was like so touching, and the way how they concluded the trilogy and the storyline, and then the multiplayer was just so good. I played a shitload out of the multiplayer in Gears 3. I played a lot of Gears 2 as well, but I don't know. Gears 3, for me, is just... Dustin says Mass Effect 1, 3, and then 2 in that order. Yeah, no, man. No way.
With me with Halo, like, I loved Halo 1.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite, I think my favorite Halo is a toss up between Halo 2 and Halo Reach.
Ooh. I mean, Reach was awesome. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. But I think still Halo 2...
That's surprising to say, and I think a lot of people also say Reach was probably one of the best Halos, because that was a game that did not include Master Chief, that included an entire different Spartan outfit.
Yeah.
Yet, the story was fantastic.
It was.
The characters were memorable. And it also shows that you can release a Halo game that isn't about Master Chief and resonates with people.
Yeah.
So we can see. And there were Spartans that people loved in Halo Reach. And people want to see these other Spartan outfits, what happened with them, so we can see what happens in the future. But yeah, between Halo 2 and Reach is between mine on there.
I for some reason, I didn't play as much of the multiplayer. I played a little in Reach, but not too much. But Halo 2 was just... It was this awesome combination of between an insanely good and epic campaign, and then, of course, at its time, we didn't have that many games that you were able to play online on the OG Xbox, right? And it was the game that brought me to console online gaming, and it was just insanely good, man. Yeah. It's always super fun. It's like, Red Dead we could continue that. Red Dead 1 and 2, people are also arguing. I'm definitely in the Red Dead 1 camp. Red Dead 2 was fantastic. It's absolutely...
From what I've played of Red Dead 2 so far, because that was one of the games that I've never actually got through to. From what I've played from it, it's fantastic. Don't get us wrong. but I haven't had the initial same impressions I've had with Red Dead 2 as I did with Red Dead 1. I'm not sure if that'll change the further I get into Red Dead 2. But
the problem, I think, I wouldn't call it a problem, but the thing is, you kind of know how the game ends after Chapter 2 or Act 2 in Red Dead 2. And the other thing is that I thought it was sometimes that it didn't hit the same great pacing that the first one had. You know, it was like, okay, you ride to that mission and you had to ride through a insanely beautiful and well-crafted world, but then you, after 5 minutes of horseback riding, you arrived at the mission and the mission was finished in 2 minutes, and it was like this was the little thing that why I say Red Dead 1 was like just from start to finish. You know, I only have like 6 games that I consider 10 out of 10, and Red Dead 1 is one of them. It is the ending hit me like barely any game has, because I did not see it coming, you know?
Yeah.
And in Red Dead 2, you kind of know after Act 2 what will happen to Arthur. And it's Red Dead 1, man. Over Red Dead 2. I know I will get a lot of hate for that.
I know Umbra is saying Red Dead 2 is a masterpiece, and it is. It's still a masterpiece. I'm also so far still in the camp of preferred 1 better so far than 2. From what I've played so far, still time, because I've still got to get through the rest of Red Dead 2 at some point.
Which is weird that you haven't finished it yet.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
One that you know where it is. It was. We now know a game is as big as it is, and I know Red Dead 2 is massive.
Yeah, it is.
Daunts me. When I know it's that big, it daunts us, and I'm like, I'll put it on the when I've got time.
Yeah, but you really shouldn't, because it is worth every minute.
Yeah.
Where do you stand with Fable?
Oh, I think Fable 2 gets it for me.
Yeah, I agree.
When I'm thinking about all 3, 3 went into just a bit wild. Like 3 went a bit wild.
Although
one was good.
You know, I finished Fable 3 completely in couch co-op from start to finish. Yeah. And of course, when you play it like that, it is just a different experience, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think Fable 2 takes the cake for that one for me.
Yeah, I agree. Fable 2 was just absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. We could talk the entire podcast about that.
About the best of trilogies.
One last. Where do you stand with the Arkham series?
You're gonna hate us for this. Never played them.
Man, why do I do this podcast with you?
you know me though. Me and superhero games, right?
Yeah,
it's the same. Like even with Spidey, like
I know you're not a superhero fan.
It was all right, but it's not something that really engages us, and it's not something I'm massively high on. If they brought a new Deadpool game out, however, where it's ridiculous Deadpool humor, that's an entirely different story, because that's just an action adventure game with some witty comedic character that's in the front. I can get on board with that. I got on board with Guardians of the Galaxy because, again, it had awesome 80s music, it had awesome combat, the story was cool, and it was funny. And that was just so well done, the way they done Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, true.
So those kind of games, fantastic. But in general, I'm not the biggest superhero guy, so I'm the worst person to ask that question to. So, yeah.
So I'll tell you, it's Arkham City,
action and adventure and things like that. And
it is.
I take their word for it. I will do.
Yeah.
But it's not one I've ever wanted to get into. I've never been a big Batman fan.
Well,
I have enjoyed the more recent films of Batman. Not the I haven't watched the the newest one.
The
but
Batman.
I loved
yeah.
the Dark Knight trilogy. The Dark Knight trilogy was fantastic. But that was because of more the villains than it was Batman.
Yeah, but then I can't imagine that you wouldn't love the Arkham series. The Arkham series had the best Joker. I know everyone says Heath Ledger was the best Joker ever, but I'd hardly disagree. Mark Hamill in the Arkham series as the Joker is...
Well, I was going to say Mark Hamill, but Mark Hamill, for me, though, is the Joker from the original cartoon.
Yeah. But he's on another level in the Arkham series.
Yeah.
Like, insanely
Even
good.
saying that, but films-wise, the only ones I got interested in was the Dark Knight trilogy.
Okay.
And that was for the villains, not for Batman. I couldn't give a shit about Batman. I loved watching What's-His-Face as Bane. I think he did an amazing Bane. I liked that backstory. And I loved Heath Ledger as the Joker. Absolutely fantastic. But yeah, it was... In terms of actual Batman, I couldn't care about Batman. I enjoyed the small role of Robin as you see Robin get introduced into the Dark Knight trilogy, specifically for the Bane film. I enjoyed watching Robin come into it as the police officer, and you only just realize afterwards that it's Robin. So yeah, that's what I enjoyed about that. There's not so much the games. I'm not bothered about playing as Batman because I don't really care about Batman.
I don't know what to make of it, man. I don't know what to make of that.
However, I loved Logan, so I am super looking forward to Wolverine because it's more Logan than it is the X-Men Wolverine, of course, in that game.
Have you seen Deadpool and Wolverine?
Deadpool, yes. Unbelievable film.
Good.
Yes, loved it. Which is why I would love a Deadpool game with Ryan Reynolds reprising his role as the character. That would do unbelievable numbers.
Yeah.
I agree. Even if you get, because I've heard the combat is fantastic with the Batman Arcane games.
It is.
You get those to do the new Deadpool, but with Ryan Reynolds playing Deadpool, with their combat capabilities that they did for Arcane.
Now we're talking, man.
More gore. You're onto a winner.
Umbra says Mark Hamill's Joker is significantly better than Ledger's Joker. I agree. And Lily says Jack Nicholson's Joker was the best. Yeah, man, Jack Nicholson. I mean, especially if you think about the time, at the early 90s.
I remember Jack Nicholson's Joker as well.
Yeah, I like that.
But then I also remember Arnold Schwarzenegger playing Mr. Freeze.
Oh yeah, no, that was like with Val Kilmer as Batman. Yeah, no.
And then
we forget that
as the Riddler.
Jim Carrey. Yeah.
and then Penguin, and then what's his the little guy is Penguin.
Danny DeVito.
Yes. Yeah.
That was good. That was good though. That was a good movie.
Unbelievably cheesy.
Yeah. If you watch them now, but back in the time, the two.
And...
Yeah, but that was a different. The first two with Nicholson as the Joker, and the second one with Danny DeVito, and what's her name as Catwoman? Blanking right now, but those two were pretty awesome. Pretty awesome, actually. Yeah. Now I want to watch Batman and play Arkham again, man.
I did watch them films, and when I think about them now, I'm like, God, they are unbelievably cringy. Like, unbelievably cringy.
It was a different time. It was a different time.
It was a different time, but that's part of the reason why I wasn't really into big superhero films. I'm like, Jesus Christ, these aren't good. Like, then we've had, of course, and what hasn't helped is we had a stage of the Avengers films being absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And fantastic films. And then you had Deadpool's made a resurgence thanks to Ryan Reynolds and co. and hit the Red Deadpool films have been fantastic. Guardians of the Galaxy films have been fun. And then you went in another unfortunate stage where the superhero films have been terrible again. Like outside of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was the cartoon version, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
Like that was great, but the rest, like others recently, none of the superhero films have been really blowing the doors off. They've been quite lackluster. So it's not really helped that case recently.
That's
Again,
true.
video games wise, the only one that's been successful video games wise since the Arkham series has been
Spider-Man.
Insomniac Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, even though it didn't hit unbelievable sales numbers, the Guardians of the Galaxy game, I would always recommend.
That is one hell of a superhero game.
Yeah.
It commercially, it wasn't a success, but the game itself was absolutely awesome. Loved it. The humor and everything, it was really, really good. All right, Dutch. Let us move on. One smaller topic before we get into the big main topics of the week. The PlayStation 5 Pro comes out in a couple of days, right? I think embargoes are going to lift in 3 days or 4 days. It'll come out next week. And this week, the PlayStation CEO Hideaki Nishino, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce it properly. I gave it a chance, but talked a little bit about it, and he said something interesting. The PlayStation 5 Pro was a 5-year project. Yeah, so development of the Pro started before the PS5 came out. So it's always been a plan for them to do such a mid-gen upgrade this gen. And in a side sentence, he mentioned that this will help them to achieve their 10-year cycle goal for the PS5 generation.
10
it
years.
Is 10 years is what he said. It is they had at least the 10 years plan when the PS5 came out to have a 10-year generation. So the days are definitely gone where we had talked about like 5-6 years generation with the PS1 and the PS2 and so on. But I thought it is interesting for multiple reasons. The PS5 Pro comes out, next week. And I totally agree with Lily in the chat. She says, really, it's coming out next week. There's like no commercial nowhere about it. I agree. I haven't seen anything like other than a couple of people posting that they have been sent the review copies, which I wouldn't say is advertisement or marketing per se. I haven't seen any commercials or anything, but it is interesting. They obviously planned this entire generation to have that PS5 Pro 5-year development cycle for that thing, and with a 10-year generation in mind. Which is crazy to think that you can launch a console in 2020 and still think that like 8-9 years later, in the year 2029, you will still be able to play remotely state-of-the-art games on it. It's like kind of a ridiculous thought. I haven't seen anyone pick that up though, so I definitely wanted to talk to you about this. What are your thoughts before I share mine?
The reason we need to get away from this and have shorter cycles is because we've said it multiple times. Technology advances significantly quicker than consoles do. And even if you have the PS4 Pro launching this year in a matter of days, it's still another over 5 years with the same console.
4 years into the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're 4 years into it now. We're going into December very shortly.
Yeah.
So technically another 5 years with the same generation, in 5 years' time, you'll be on to like 7, 8 series RTX cards, and
yeah,
they'll be significantly more advanced
yeah,
than we are now. And we need to get, like we've spoke about this before with the mobile phone segment, but there's a reason mobile phones are consistently releasing versions every year. And it isn't to try and just get money, it's because technology's changing that much. The boards are getting significantly smaller. The chips are getting significantly smaller. You'll be able to do more with less. The costs are less. You can get bigger, better screens. You can get more powerful things. The batteries are lasting longer. The efficiency of each of these phones are lasting longer. The cameras are getting better, so on and so forth. But every year is gradual implementation of new things. And the reason to do it is to keep up with what they need to do going forwards. Imagine having a mobile phone and expecting it in 10 years' time to still hold the battery, to still keep up with things that are going on in the world, to still do what you need to do with things that have advanced. It just wouldn't happen. You wouldn't be able to do that. Like, we always joked about the Switch because the Switch was already 5 years outdated when it originally released. It had like a 10-year-old mobile card built into it. It was ridiculous. And coming out now, we know the next Switch anyway is probably going to be on par with the One X PS4 Pro, which is horrific. Like, it's horrific if you think about it.
Yeah.
But for Nintendo, that's fantastic.
It's so weird. If you think about it, that this Switch 2 is going to come out probably early next year, and it'll be on par like 8-year-old consoles.
Yeah.
You sell that as state of the art, then it's so weird. So I was also like a little, okay, man, did they really think the PS5 generation will last 10 years? I mean, maybe plans changed by now. The way he phrased it is that when they launched the PS5, they had the PS5 Pro already in mind because they wanted to do a 10-year console cycle. So it has always been...
Yeah, but he's also said with the release of the PS5 Pro, it's in line with their 10-year cycle.
Yeah.
So that stipulates to me that they are still planning this as a 10-year cycle. And
if they do plan that as a 10-year cycle, and maybe plans change because Xbox is doing something else, it'll still be like an 8-9 year cycle. And that means that you kind of need to sell the PS5 Pro now to consumers that already have the PS5 and I mean, outside of the hardcore bubble that will upgrade anyway, because otherwise you won't be able to like withstand state of or run state of the art games. We think about 4 years from now, in the year 2028, the demand of the engines will be nuts, and so you kind of need to bring the PS5 Pro then to the consumers, and I don't see any effort to do that. Not with the price point. We've talked about the horrific price point before. I don't see it like in terms of marketing or anything, and maybe that will change next week once the console is out, maybe. Yeah. But we kind of need to remind ourselves that we are not talking about this hardcore bubble that we are all probably in. And we are on Twitter every day, and in a super small bubble of hardcore gamers that will definitely be aware the console is out. And yes, if, I don't know, a Dragon Age gets a PS5 Pro patch, it'll run best on that machine. But if you really want to sustain like a 9 or 10 year console cycle, you kind of have to get that thing out to the mass market, and the mass market is not going to pick it up at the price point and without marketing and everything. So it's really a weird way. And I honestly thought one of the first things that popped into my head when I read this, the rumors are out there that Xbox is going to launch the next gen early. Rumor is 26. If PlayStation really wants to do like a 9 or 10 year console cycle this gen. I mean, a 26 launch could like insanely behoove Xbox, right? You would get like an insanely big head start. We're not talking about a year or so, like they had the 1 year advantage with the 360, which already helped them a lot. If you remember, that was the only generation where Xbox was basically on par at the end of the gen with PlayStation in terms of install base. And for Xbox now to launch a console in 26 would be like an even more insane move if Sony really does this 10-year cycle, and it definitely will change their plans. But that if you haven't started next gen development already now or a couple of years ago, you won't be like, it takes 5 years to develop a console. It's just a fact. Yeah. And maybe you can speed things a little up and do a 4.5 year development cycle, but that will still lead them to the year 28, 29 and 26 release for Xbox. Man, I sure hope they are doing that, man. I sure hope that would be like, that would make the console market interesting again. And it's not just me rooting for Xbox here, which I do because not of console war things, but because I want proper competition. Everyone knows that I'm always pro competition, and that would actually make an even smarter move if that 10-year cycle from Sony is actually true. So I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It would be for Xbox, it's a benefit because that means that they'll get ahead of the game.
Yeah.
When it comes to technology, and that means they'll always be one step ahead of the game.
I agree.
If they shorten the life cycles, that means they're always going to have the newer and better hardware going forwards. If they say, okay, we're no longer doing mid-gen refreshes, now we're just going to do
6-year cycles again. Yeah, 5-6 years. And I think if you think about it, a 6-year console cycle, it is really hard to make an argument against that, because the first 2 years of the next gen will be cross-gen anyway, right? So even if Xbox brings out their next gen console in 26, we will still be able to play the new releases on the Series consoles in 27 and probably also in 28. So you have that overlap anyway. But like you said earlier, if you think about how fast technology moves, it is just crazy to think that you can live even with an 8-year console cycle. It's like we are 4 years now into the generation. You can tell, that the consoles are outpowered. It's not even close to what a mid-size PC. We're not talking the super high-end PCs will always be like in a different league, yeah. But if you talk about a mid-size gaming PC, that's the ballpark where the consoles should play a part, and we are not in that after 4 years into gen. So we can live through 25 with the Series, but then in 26, of course, it would totally make sense, man. Yeah,
it would. I don't get the thinking behind, we're going to do a 10-year cycle. They know themselves how much technology advances in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
It doesn't make much sense. If you want to stay ahead of the game, especially if you see how quickly PC advances year on year on year on year on year. Like, there's no wonder we've got so many cross-gen games, because we're just lagging behind so much.
I agree. But this is, again, brings me back to the competition thing. You can only do that if you think you have an absolute market lead, and it doesn't matter of course, it makes a huge difference in the development budget. It takes billions of dollars or euros to develop a new console. And the question is, do you want to do that every 5-6 years? Or do you want to do that every 10 years? And you can do the 10 years, of course, if there's no competition in the market. Because then people really don't have a choice. If you take Xbox out of the picture, let's assume, they wouldn't have any competition whatsoever. Of course, why not do a 10-year cycle and save the money? Because people don't really have a choice. The other choice they have is the Switch, and we don't need to talk about that in terms of there's no AAA game coming to the Switch other than the Nintendo games themselves. Right? Try playing Call of Duty. Well, Call of Duty is supposedly coming to Switch. Let's see about that. Maybe the Switch 2 then, but try to play Dragon Age there. There's no chance. So if you don't have the option, and for that reason, we need competition, and Sony needs to buckle up and take the money and develop more frequently better hardware. I mean, they kind of did now with the Pro. Yeah, I give them that, but you know what I mean in terms of new gen tech. So yeah, let's stay on Sony for a bit. This week they announced that they are shutting down Firewalk.
Yes.
The studio that made the incredibly successful Concord.
Yes.
You all remember the Concord? It was out for what, 7-8 days? Not even 2 weeks, like
11 days, I think.
11 days. Maybe 11 days, 11 days. Cost $200 million to make.
That's without anything else. That's without the studio costs.
Without, and marketing and such overhead. $200 million game that was only out for 11 days before they pulled the plug, refunded people that bought the game, and that studio is now being shut down.
Yep.
What are your thoughts, man?
Extremely harsh. A lot of the blame lies on Sony, I think. They knew what was going to happen with that game, but they ultimately set the price point because they are the company owners of it. And I think they should need to shoulder some of that burden. We said the game was going to die well before it did anyway, because you don't release an arena shooter, arena hero shooter, in a market full of free-to-play arena shooters at a £40 price point. Even if it does have built-in season features, it makes no difference, because people just will not invest in it initially. Why would you? Because there's better alternatives that don't cost anything for entry.
Yeah.
And they found that out to their detriment when there was less than 2,000 people playing the game at launch.
Yeah.
Less than the beta, which was free and open.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think there's part of the blame is the studio for thinking they're going to get involved in a very competitive space with some absolute heavyweights that just dominate that space. And then the other side is Sony being, ignorant and intentional with putting a price point on a game that shouldn't have had a price point on it. It should have been free to play from the off.
Yeah.
That would have been the only way to save that game. But instead, they just canned it. And now the studio has paid the price for that. It's never nice. It's never nice to see people lose their jobs, of which a lot of people have lost their jobs, of course, this week over that. Ultimately, it's lesson learned from both studio direction and even if you say, oh, well, they took a risk on making... It wasn't a risk. It was they were playing it safe but made stupid choices. You're playing it safe by doing a game in a genre that's already very popular. But you made very stupid choices in how you put that game out and how you advertise that game.
I agree.
And how you price that game.
I agree.
So it wasn't even the fact that they took a risk. It wasn't like they did something new, because there was nothing new about Concord. you could go out on a limb and say, if, for instance, somebody made a brand new horror game and that doesn't do well, or a brand new action RPG, brand new IP, and that doesn't do well, and they've kind of implemented some new systems and things like that, then you would go, well, at least they attempted to take a risk and do something new. But ultimately, they haven't done anything new, and they made some silly choices from a board level, and the developers have paid the price.
I agree. I mean, listen, I had many thoughts going through my head. Of course, it is super unfortunate for the developers themselves. They got acquired by Sony. They released the game. We don't really know the insights. We can only speculate. But I would be super surprised if the decision wasn't with Sony to choose the business model to release it as a full price game. That usually isn't the studio's decision in such an organization. Obviously, it's the publisher, and that's Sony. And so, yeah, I feel sorry for the developers. But then I also noticed two things. The first is, and how do I phrase that without sounding too console war-y, but the way how media and many people on the socials discussed that closure, again another Sony closure, versus the way how they reported about it when Microsoft shut down studios, because it is basically the same thing. Herman Holtz said,
except Microsoft did it significantly in a way that didn't make sense, because they had games that released that were popular, and then closed the studio down, and it made little sense. On the Sony side, however, you can understand it, but it still needs called out. It
is basically still the same thing. Herman Holtz even used basically the same phrasing like Phil Spencer did. Remember when Phil shut down the Redfall studio, Arcane, and I'm blanking on the name of Hi-Fi Rush, was God help me.
Tango
Gameworks. He said, well, he's not in a position to run a business that doesn't make money. And listen, what did Herman Holtz say this week? He's not in a position to run a business that doesn't make money, right? That was the official explanation. Basically the same wording, or almost the same wording he used. So it's the same thing. And the question is, why is there always this kind of double standard? This is just something I noticed. I get that publishers need to run the business as profitable as possible, and a studio that burned you $200 million. At the end of the day, well, you kind of need to think: is it worth keeping that studio? But
on the flip side for me on that situation is, you knew they were making that game when you purchased them.
Exactly. You knew the game they made.
If you didn't like the game at that point, you wouldn't have purchased the studio, which means you need to take some of the responsibility.
I totally agree.
Even if they burnt 200 million on the first game and it wasn't successful, you go, right, listen, first one hasn't worked out. We've still got trust in the studio's talents to make something better for the next one. So let's just... This was a horrific learning experience. It didn't go well. Let's just dust ourselves down and we'll do something else. And let's hope the next project is successful. If that next project is not successful, then understandably, you go, right, this just hasn't worked out. Unfortunately, we're going to have to close the studio. But to buy the studio, knowing full well the title that they were developing, and the Sony's and PlayStation's own board level fuck ups with the pricing and the way that the game was advertised and the way that the game was put out, because ultimately that's down to them as much as it's down to the studio.
Absolutely.
They are as much burden, take that burden of responsibility as the studio does.
I
Studio
agree.
can only do so much, and they don't. The studio themselves, we know this from the studio level, they don't set the price. That's ultimately up to PlayStation as to what they want to set the price of that game at. They don't go, oh yeah, we're going to make this, or we're going to do this. Because Xbox go, okay, well, we're going to put all these games in Game Pass, but the price of this game is going to be this.
Yeah.
They set that price.
They set the price. The game should have launched for free, or at least in PS Plus, at least, and then at a lower, retail price of.
Then you think back to, okay, we've had an absolutely horrific open beta where literally nobody has played the game. Before we release, this is what we're going to do.
You kind of have to rethink.
We're going to refund the people that have already pre-ordered, and we're going to release this game as free to play. We're going to have to delay it by a few more weeks. We're going to have to rejig the game's built-in,
even a couple of months if that's the case. Yeah. But I think they felt like they can get away with it because they didn't have anything outside of Astrobot lined up for this year, and they kind of needed this thing, and they looked at how well Helldivers 2 did, also a full retail priced game, and it was just not a smart decision. So, but seeing the media report just with the typical double standard is the one thing that I noticed. Yeah, if Xbox shuts down a studio, we have weeks and weeks of articles written about it, and how bad Game Pass is for the industry, and how much Satya screws up the Xbox strategy, and that Phil is not having a proper vision, and the headlines, and we didn't see anything remotely to that. And it's not the first closure of a studio on the Sony side either, right? This layoff period and shutting down studios is not just a Sony and Xbox thing, it's an industry-wide thing, but somehow it's always a different story when it's Xbox, right? Yeah. So this is the first thing. The second thing, and that is probably even more concerning for us gamers, is because at the end of the day, we're all smart enough to make our own decisions, no matter the headlines of the media. That is the other thing, that it just looks that Sony is really, really struggling with their online and games as a service strategy. You just can't get the hang of it. Yes, there was Helldivers. Helldivers was not a first party title. It was a second party deal. The game is developed by an independent studio, Arrowhead. They bought the exclusivity. It is a little different, but
and they've even come out and said they'd like the game to be on Xbox. It's just up to Sony and Microsoft.
It is up to them to figure it out, right? And then but if you look at the first party portfolio from Sony, and they have, it was Jim Ryan's strategy to have these 10 or 12 games as a service titles. Half of them were canned. You look at Faction. What happened to Factions is one IP where people were actually really excited to have like a multiplayer version of it, right? They canned that. Concord was like one of the biggest failures I can remember in video game history, honestly, to have a massive game with a 200 million budget behind it only be available for 11 days before you actually had to pull the hard plug and really take it offline and refund everyone. Like it's hard for me to think of another game that had something happen like that. There have been big names. You think about the Avengers game, yes, probably in a similar budget reason, with especially with licensing all the IP and whatnot, but at least that game ran for a good year or two, right? And nobody really liked it or played it, but they tried to continue the support. Or think of Suicide Squad earlier this year. Yeah, big budget behind it. I loved it, but no one played it. And but to really take it down that way, it just shows you that they are really struggling with their games as a service titles, yeah. And the next big one is supposedly going to be Marathon from Bungie, right? They made sure.
Cross-platform.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. They made sure after announcing this week that they close Firewalk down that they reinsured everyone. Yeah, Marathon is going to be multiplayer. It was super important suddenly. Yeah, but of course you think about that. Is Bungie going to suffer a similar fate, right? Because with Factions, at least you can say Naughty Dog is not going to be closed down because they still have their single player IP, one of the core pillars in the Sony roster. Yeah, you're not going to close down a Naughty Dog, but they did it with Firewalk. What's going to happen with Marathon? Is that game going to be set up for failure as well? We haven't seen any gameplay yet. The game is supposedly coming out next year. They reassured that. Yeah, we are on good track for 25 release, and we are closing out 24 now. We're in November already. We haven't seen any footage yet. So, and for them to announce like Firewalk, shut it down, and like literally a couple of hours later to come out and reassure about Marathon, and it just tells you, okay, Sony is really struggling with that games as a service or multiplayer kind of games, right?
Yeah. Well, they are struggling with it, but they're also, and we said this before, they just don't have the ability, and they don't have the it's not the ability to make a great game, because they probably could make a great game, but they don't have the ability to withstand the pressures of live service games.
Yeah.
From a director standpoint, the reason Microsoft has been successful with live service games for Xbox isn't because they've launched in a good way. It's because they've stuck through them when they've been not in a good place, and they've allowed the studio to continue the vision to get it to a place that actually is successful. That takes hard work, that takes confidence in your studios, and it takes a little bit of financial pressure behind to say, listen, we're not going to make money immediately on this thing. We're probably going to make a loss for the first year or so whilst this game gets up and running, finds its user base, and we've got some content rolling into it. Microsoft have the nous to be able to sit back and allow the studios to get things done. We've seen that with Sea of Thieves, which had a terrible launch. It was lacking so much content, and became successful.
State of Decay 2.
If people didn't class Halo as the greatest of launches, Microsoft have still sat back and said, we're still going to give you time to get the multiplayer sorted. We're still going to give you the time to sort out the live service plan for this thing.
Yeah.
And they've countlessly added to Halo Infinite to the part where it is still being played today, and they've still got content rolled out for it, and they've just adding a new weapon to the game for the first time, and they're just adding more content and maps and playlists to the game, and they're doing that continuously. And that's not the only game, because it's the same with Forza Horizon, the live service, where they continuously support that, and that's add-ons. And there is an abundance of showing that these things can continue to thrive even if they haven't been successful at launch.
Yeah.
Microsoft is willing to stand by them in order to make them successful. And we said this before Concord launched. One of the reasons that none of these games will ever be successful is because Sony do not have the ability to sit back and make sure that any of these live service games could be successful if given the chance to be. But they have to be willing to lose money first in order to make money. And Sony are not willing to lose money. If a studio loses money, they can the studio or can the project entirely and move on to the next thing. Instead of going, right, it's not yet successful, but it can be if we get the content right.
Yeah,
and they would make a successful live service game if they were able to do that, but they're not willing to.
Yeah,
Sony is just not willing to.
especially since the market is so competitive, like you mentioned earlier.
Naughty Dog say that as well, because Naughty Dog came out and said the reason we didn't continue with Factions was because it was going to take so significant resources in order to run this game, and we're not going to put that resource into it.
Yeah.
It's essentially the rundown.
Yeah.
We are unwilling to part with the staff to maintain the content rollout or the money in order to maintain the content rollout for a live service game.
Yeah.
So that tells me that if one of their best and brightest studios is unwilling to do it, then it's not meant to be for Sony. They don't have the nous to stick back and wait for something to become successful with hard work. They want it to be successful at launch or not at all. If it's not successful at launch and it doesn't make big numbers, and we've seen that with Days Gone, it didn't hit the numbers, so they canned the franchise.
Even though it was still a fairly successful game in itself. It sold, I think, in the first year, 8 million or so.
Yeah.
I don't really remember. Yeah. So every other publisher would consider it still a success.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree there, man.
And it's just a damn shame, but Sony, they've grown to the point where unless they're immediately successful, they don't want to know.
Yeah.
They will can anything that isn't an immediate success.
Agree. Yeah, man. Let us move away from Sony for a bit and go back to Xbox. Obviously, they had a big launch the other week. Black Ops 6 launched as a massive success. It is the record-breaking Call of Duty launch. Sitting at a record for day one players, and another record they broke is Game Pass subscriber ads. Right? But it's not just that. The unit sales on PlayStation and Steam were also up 60% year over year for Call of Duty. So I think we can bury the narrative that Game Pass kills games once and for all, right? Who would have thought? Yeah.
Game Pass does not kill games. It doesn't kill game sales either, because people will ultimately still buy games. They want the game. So some people just have that mentality where they go, I know it's in Game Pass, but I'm going to buy it anyway. Or I always buy Call of Duties anyway, so I'll just do it. Or Steam players that just want, okay, well, I'm just going to get it on Battle.net anyway, instead of on Xbox's thing. I know I can get it on Xbox, but I'd rather play it on Battle.net because I've got all my Call of Duties on there. And PC players are like that, and they'll just stay that way. And then you've got still an influx of people that probably got sick of buying Call of Duties all the time because they've never been great, going and playing it on Game Pass, and they're enjoying it. And a lot of those people will be cross sales. There'll be people that go, actually, I'm going to buy the game now because I love playing it. Yeah.
I mean, on PC, people are very, very much hooked to Steam, right? Epic has been trying to get into the PC storefront for years with absolutely zero success. PC Game Pass is slightly growing number, but people on PC just buy their games on Steam. And even on console, adding new subscribers really doesn't hurt their business case, obviously, because most people are longer subscribed than a month that it takes them to finish a game, especially with a game like a Call of Duty. So, and besides that is the viral effect, right? Is what we always say when it comes to this Game Pass discussion. You cannot just look at the pure metrics. Yes, you will probably make on a short term more revenue by selling the game once, rather than in a subscription service that you can get for 17 euros a month, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, but it's this long-term thing that makes it sustainable. And then there's the viral thing. People play more games when they have the feeling that it's free. It's this. I play Call of Duty right now for free because I'm subscribed anyway. But I also talk about it on the socials, and people get into this hype, and then others, oh, this year's Call of Duty is actually good. Okay, I'm gonna get it, but I'm buying it on PC as always, on Steam or on PlayStation. I don't have the, and it's just this viral effect. Everyone's talking about it, loving it, and this is also a factor you have to consider in your business case, right? Is the free marketing you get through more people playing the game. Because then games can become a viral hit. And of course it helps that Black Ops 6 and Dutch is gone now for some reason. Which is kind of weird. So I don't know what happened. But I just continue with it. Oh, his PC had a blue screen. Okay. That is weird. I'll just try to see if I can do anything for him in the meantime. But yeah. So yeah, Call of Duty is actually a really good one this year. People love it. That helps also a lot, obviously. But yeah, with Game Pass, I can't really remember any game that became a failure or not a business case by being in Game Pass. There is just no game out there. And Call of Duty is such a good example now. Everyone was scared, when they put it in Game Pass, they're gonna kill the IP. It's gonna devalue what Call of Duty is. It's now just Game Pass fodder, and that narrative is definitely shut down now. It's a success. It's a good game that definitely helps. But yeah, the Game Pass narrative, I think we can shut that down once and for all. Unfortunately, we didn't really get proper Game Pass subscriber numbers. I would have loved to hear how many people actually have subscribed because of that to Game Pass. But yeah, Microsoft doesn't publish those numbers. And now I see a few people coming over from Dutch's stream to ours because his screen is still, PC is still down. He'll be back in a second. Yeah, another interesting thing that we learned this week about Call of Duty is that Call of Duty's development structure is not going to change under Microsoft. Activision has like 15 different studios working on the franchise, and they basically rotate in a 3-year phase. So they are grouped into 5 studio groups, 3 studio groups, each with 5 studios, and they have this 3-year cycle, and it was confirmed this week through Microsoft that they are not going to change that structure. Dutch, you have added the wrong window or wrong camera.
With 5
Man, what's happening here?
I don't know what's going on here. I don't know why it's done that. I've just got to, for some. It's not even picking up. There we go. It's
There
picking
we
up
go.
a laptop thing. It's obviously completely killed the camera because the camera's not being picked up properly now.
Okay.
So
Hey, you're good now. You're good now. You're good now.
This is the laptop camera, by the way. This isn't even my actual webcam. My actual webcam's not being recognized.
You're still looking good, man. You're still looking good. Oh, I can change back the overlay now.
Yeah, I got blue screen of death, people, so my podcast is kaput. Unfortunately, so.
Hey, it's all life. Shit happens. Technical issues happen.
Yep.
There's just sometimes you can't do anything about it, and the blue screen is definitely one of those things, right?
Yeah.
Dutch, I was just talking about something. Call of Duty. We learned this week that they won't change their structure, the development structure under Microsoft. 15 different studios from Activision work on the franchise. They have they are on a 3-year cycle. So basically each year, 5 studios release the next Call of Duty in a 3-year cycle. And a lot of people, I remember us talking about it also on the podcast. A lot of people, during the acquisition phase of Activision were like, yeah, once Microsoft is going to own ABK, they're gonna change what they do with Call of Duty. And I was also hoping for that it's not gonna be an annual release. I want a proper campaign every 2 or 3 years, and they can do like map updates, map packs or whatnot on a yearly basis. But we don't need a Call of Duty every year. But it seems Microsoft is going to keep that structure. And I think it was obvious because Call of Duty just is a money printing machine, right? That's why Activision did it, and why should Microsoft stop doing it and basically give up that money printing machine? So what are your thoughts on this, man, now that you are back online?
You can understand it from a business perspective. From a fan perspective, however, I'd rather they took their time and made great campaigns every couple of years. I think they would be better refined that way. Maybe elongate their season passes for their multiplayer, because they'll still make money off that regardless. The multiplayer is good on this one, so just get a small team continually making new maps, new battle pass stuff to do, things to keep the multiplayer segment happy for a 2-year period, and do it every 2 years. And they'll still make boatloads of money on microtransactions and battle passes, so they'll be happy there. But on the flip side, of course, then you get an awesome new campaign every couple of years instead of every year. And I think you get more advancements on the actual single player side in that respect. And the stories remain great, as opposed to some of the ones that we've had previously. Thankfully, Black Ops 6's story is good so far. The gameplay is awesome. We just want that more often. Yeah.
I mean, every couple of years we get a great Call of Duty campaign. Remember Modern Warfare? Everyone liked that, especially Modern Warfare 2 was a very beloved campaign. And then we had a couple of years of not so good ones with Vanguard and so on. And this year we are lucky to get a good one again. That's just what it is. But I agree with Fussy Tomato in the chat, who says the market clearly demands a Call of Duty every year. And why would Microsoft tinker with that, right? There's no reason, especially after releasing this week also some. They had their business call, their earnings report, and we learned that they had it is the Q1, the first quarter of their fiscal year. They had a 43% jump in the gaming revenue, and that is obviously due to the acquisition. Satya confirmed that as well. It just drives revenue. It generates the money. By the way, also interesting from that earnings call, the hardware revenue declined 29% year over year, right? Yeah. So I don't expect this was the last earnings call where we will probably see such a jump because now they have Activision in their group for a year. So the next earnings report will be interesting, because the last 4 earnings reports were all gaming revenue grew 50%. But obviously, if you compare year to year basis, that's clear, because it was the first year of Activision in the group. Now we will see what it will do. They also confirmed, by the way, that they have reached a monthly active user all-time high, and Game Pass also set a Q1 revenue record. So I think not really surprising. Again, these numbers are always compared to year over year. So Q1 from 23 to Q1 from 24. And of course, Game Pass grew because now they actually released games with in that period in between Starfield, which was Q1 for them last year, and Hellblade now, and Call of Duty now, and so on. Of course, it grew. I thought an interesting thing, though, is what Satya said. I wanted to talk to you about that. What Satya said during this earnings call, because he briefly continued on our favorite subject, right? The Xbox strategy. Let me just read the quote and then pose my question. Satya Nadella said during the earnings call, "We are bringing great games to more people on more devices. With our acquisition of Activision Blizzard King, which closed October 23, we've added hundreds of millions of players to our ecosystem. We now have 20 franchises that have generated over 1 billion in lifetime revenue, from Candy Crush, Diablo, and Halo to Warcraft, Elder Scrolls, and Gears of War. And with Xbox Cloud Gaming, we continue to innovate to offer players more ways to experience the games they love, where, when, and how they want. Finally, we brought 4 of our fan-favorite titles to the Nintendo Switch and Sony's PlayStation for the first time, as we continue to extend our content to new platforms." So... yeah, he basically doubles down on continuing down the road of releasing more games on more platforms. Indiana Jones going to be the next one. What are your thoughts? Is this any way surprising? I mean, they own some of the biggest gaming IPs now. Of course, they've seen just growth in general because of that. When you count every Call of Duty player into your ecosystem, you suddenly have a huge jump in the player base. So this really doesn't come as a surprise. The question really is, how sustainable will it be? What are your expectations? Do we see a similar growth over the next quarters? Where do you stand on this, man?
Yeah, I don't expect similar growth over the next quarters. I think it'll be where they are now, the level of money that they're making, and we'd expect to see that maintained or grow a little bit, but it won't be the significant jump that we've had year on year.
Yeah.
If it continues that significant jump year on year, that would only be put down to significant amount of releases across the board, which would mean that we need to have at least, obviously, Call of Duty is there as an initial Game Pass kind of boost, but this is not including the December. This is including January, where Call of Duty will make its money.
Yeah.
And going into next year, where it'll continue to make more money on that title and battle passes and skins and cosmetics and things like that. So we'll still see another big boost on the next financial call from a Call of Duty perspective. Then, of course, you've still got the likes of Candy Crush, etc., which continue to make loads of money. So you'll still see more and more boosts on that front, especially with the new Call of Duty every year. Then you're going to see boosts of revenue. But the only way it's going to maintain a steady Game Pass increase year on year is, of course, continuing to put these Call of Duty titles in there day one, which will continue to bring people into the service. It's obviously shown that it's happening, but also a steady cadence of games that are going into that service that meet expectations. Now, obviously, like you say, we've had a couple of games this year that have been in there that have done okay, but they still haven't been the ones that really bring people over like Call of Duty does.
Yeah.
Do I foresee Indie doing that? No.
Not with it also releasing a few months later on PlayStation, especially.
Do I foresee Fable doing that? Possibly. Possibly. But it's a wait and see thing. You're going to see positive results year on year for revenue for Microsoft and Game Pass, I think, for the foreseeable future. Nowhere near the extent that they have on the initial kind of 2 periods that they've had Activision. But on the hardware front, again, we've been through this multiple times. I don't see how that's going to increase when they still don't have a reason to buy the console.
Yeah.
And then the only reason we can see a hardware boost is if, like you say, in the next 2 years, they release that new console and they start the cycle again. I don't see them having a sharp jump in consoles being sold otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I still think they will grow their overall business numbers. Obviously not 50% like they've done with the last 4 quarters, because a year-over-year comparison is just unfair if you have Activision for the first time in your earnings reports. Of course, they have things coming that will grow their revenue. No doubt. Call of Duty just released. Bunch of other really good games are coming. There's Stalker 2 coming. The Flight Sim is coming. Indiana Jones is coming. In February, we have Avowed coming. All those games will generate revenue. But I don't think that they will see the year-over-year growth like they did now over the last calendar year, right? So, yeah, and I also expect them to fully continue down with the multi-platform strategy, which will generate just additional revenue as well for them overall. So I think the Microsoft gaming division in total, and that it's obviously what they are interested in, will be more than fine. Question still remains is just how will the console space evolve, right? Because that's just not looking good for them. Period. Yeah, people want to put when they say stuff like that right now, it's not just right now. It just doesn't look good for them. And with the strategy, I don't think of bringing games like an Indiana Jones or Doom to other platforms, it's gonna help them in the console space. But overall, the gaming division will be just fine. Yeah, more than fine. Yeah. I could see the 26 release if Sony like we mentioned earlier, if Sony really does aims for a 10 years console cycle, right? A 26 release or so could definitely change things up, but yeah, we shall see. Let us stick with Xbox for a bit and talk about something interesting. Perfect Dark. We have seen Perfect Dark for the first time, gameplay of Perfect Dark for the first time during this year's June showcase, right? It looked fantastic. I really loved what I've seen. It looked really good, not just visually, but the gameplay. I really enjoyed that with the parkour mixed with first-person combat shooting and stealth elements, and I loved what I've seen. It's Perfect Dark, this game that has been in development now for 6 years already. Yeah, they started. Yeah. They founded the studio in 2018. It's now the end of 24. The game has been in development for 6 years now. Has yet again received a new director. and yet again, someone from Insomniac. The game designer and director from Wolverine over at Insomniac, Brian Horton, is now, as of this summer, the director for Perfect Dark. Ratchet and the previous Ratchet and Clank leads will now take over Wolverine, and Perfect Dark has their third director in just a few years. Because remember, I'm blanking on the name now. And the other guy that worked on Sunset Overdrive was
Drew.
Yeah, Drew something. Left and went back to Insomniac. Actually, he got replaced, and now we have the third director. So, what do you think of this? Is this a good thing? The Wolverine director that was also previously involved heavily in the Spider-Man games is now taking over Perfect Dark.
Can't be a bad thing. Gameplay-wise, the Spider-Man in games are fantastic. So, hopefully that just emphasizes what they want to do here and brings his expertise in order to make it a great playing game. Ultimately, that's one thing we always want from these things. Is first and foremost, the gameplay is great. Yeah. Secondly, it's got an interesting story. Those are the key two things. Whether or not it looks fantastic is a great addition. If it looks fantastic, brilliant. But first and foremost, it needs to play fantastic and it needs to have a great kind of memorable storyline. So if you get the game designer from Insomniac over that's been working on Wolverine and has worked on Spider-Man, you can't go wrong, really. It's a fantastic studio, so
it is on multiple levels. Insomniac is a powerhouse studio. Whether you like Spider-Man or not, there's no argument that they have been the only Sony studio that have been fairly consistent in their releases, right? And they juggle multiple big IP. All their games look fantastic on a technical level, right? And so there is absolutely something to be gained. For me, it's just weird that you switch out during development so many times, like the game director. It's just something that isn't normal. Let's put it that way. And I do agree on the gameplay thing you said, but I think with an IP like a Perfect Dark, you kind of expect AAA visuals, right? So while gameplay always is key, I mean, look at Visions of Mana. It's not on a technical level, not the super most advanced game, but it is gameplay wise and story wise just so phenomenal that you put it as a game of the year contender, right? Of course that's key, but at some point and with some IPs, you just expect those games also to be on a technical level. So I think they can definitely benefit from someone like Brian Horton, who has worked at a very well-managed studio. And I think the entire initiative idea, we've seen it at the beginning when they founded the studios and said, well, we make a quadruple A game, right? And they hired the biggest of the biggest names in the industry, and all of a sudden half of them left again because too many alpha dogs were in the room, and now the game is basically developed by the Tomb Raider studio. Help me out. Crystal Dynamics and the initiative itself, well, they play their part. They have the lead, absolutely. But the big manpower comes from Crystal. It's kind of a weird thing. So my only hope is that the game still has soul, because that is what usually comes from the creative directors in a game, that see their game as their baby, and pour their passion in, and then you see just, okay, that's one thing. And if the creative lead and the direction of the game changes too often over the development cycle, not many games came out in a good state then. So I just hope that this is not going to cause exactly that issue, because coming into a game that is already in development for 6 years, taking that game over, what do? Do you change its core idea or strategy to make it your own, or do you just finish something that isn't your thing? It's just, you know what I mean? So, we shall see.
Or just help them refine the combat and the gameplay that they've already got. Bring your expertise into saying, okay, you've got this, but there's an easier way of doing it. And this is the easier way of doing it. Or this is the better way of doing it. This is, I know what you're trying to achieve, and maybe it kind of need a little bit more help to kind of get to achieve a certain mechanic. Or that's the kind of thing I would expect him to bring in at this late stage in development.
Yeah, agree. So, at the end of the day, his track record is great. So it should still be, or let's hope that it'll turn out the way we want the game to be. What do you think in terms of release window? Is this gonna be a 25 title?
No,
is it a 26?
I think 26.
26, yeah. I think I'm
in the more of the game this June, and that's when we'll get a coming 2026 logo.
Yeah, I agree. It did this idea to show certain gameplay segments, although we did get a fairly continued gameplay segment. When you remember Fable, they've shown Fable now for the third year, third time, and now we know, okay, it's coming out next year, all cool, but we never got like continued gameplay. They've shown that with Perfect Dark. Gave me the impression like we got 8-minute gameplay or 7-minute gameplay straight. No cuts, no nothing. Gave me the impression the game is already fairly far in development, right? So it could be a 25 title, but honestly, I think they're gonna keep Perfect Dark and Gears as launch games for the next gen console in 26.
Possibly.
Yeah. So let's see what Brian Horton can do with the time left, and what if he can make his mark on the game. I'm still pretty excited for it. So, but Dutch, let us move to our community questions, because we've got plenty of them this week. All right. The community questions, like every Wednesday, usually on Wednesdays, you can write in questions or topics you would like us to discuss. We post on Twitter. Many people write in there. We post here on YouTube, but you can also send us different kind of questions, just the way you want. DSP sent me actually a question for last week, but since we didn't have a show last week, we're gonna write it in now. He reached out via DMs. That's also cool. If you've got questions or topics, just send them however you like. So he says, when the time comes where Microsoft Gaming is dwarfing Sony Interactive in revenue, profit, and game output, what do you think Sony is likely to do, try and match Microsoft's growth margins?
I don't think they can. Because
I agree.
Sony are really good at single-player games, but
they are.
In order to really, really push on, you need to be really good at live service games that have consistent revenue streams.
Yeah.
And they aren't. Yes, they're pushing into PC, but again, for single player games on PC, it's not the same thing. You still don't get the same continuous kind of revenue buffers and extreme jumps that you would have. So I don't think you will see the same kind of profit jumps that Microsoft will see because of that. Microsoft have and always will be the kings of the multiplayer segment when it comes to creating and cultivating live service games. They're now accustomed to it. They have some of the, if not the biggest franchises in the world in their portfolio. It's going to be extremely hard to compete with that on a monthly basis. When you have a look at World of Warcraft or Candy Crush or Call of Duty, Elder Scrolls Online, Fallout 76, Sea of Thieves, Forza series, like Halo, Gears, all of these as part of their portfolio now. That's not including the other single-player games that come out every other year, whether that be the new Doom, which is set to be multi-plat next year. Then you have a look at Fable, that's going to be dropping, and then you have a look at a new Halo in the future, and new Gears in the future, and then you have a look at, again, Indiana Jones, which is multi-plat, so they're going to have two streamlines. And unless Sony go completely multi-plat, which would significantly boost revenues across the board, and they won't, at least not for a very long time, they're not going to be able to keep up with the significant revenue spikes that Microsoft are going to have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at how did Microsoft get there to be able to report in this earnings report like a 43% year-over-year revenue jump, they spent $70 billion on it, right? And it's just a funding that Sony doesn't have. So you can respond with smaller acquisitions, and Sony has been doing that over the last couple of years. They've acquired a lot of studios, but the biggest one was Bungie, right, for $2.something billion, which is already a pretty substantial investment for Sony. But they simply can't afford a deal like an Activision and Blizzard King to get to those growths. So the other strategy that Microsoft has been doing in order to grow is, of course, the multi-platform strategy. It started many years ago with the Play Anywhere initiative, where they try to get the foothold into PC. Fairly successful, and obviously Sony is trying to do something similar, but really not with the same commitment. They could change that. I could see, and I still believe eventually they will also launch all their games, may they be multiplayer or single player, day one, because they are leaving too much money on the table at the end of the day. I highly doubt that they will ever go fully multi-plat like Microsoft is doing now and bringing a PlayStation game to Xbox. I highly, highly doubt that, because that they know that their core revenue generator is the console, is the console sales, and is the big install base that they have there. Each and every generation, plus minus 100 million consoles in install base, is what they make their money off, and they're not going to jeopardize that by bringing games to an Xbox, for instance. This is just, I don't see that happening. So what can they realistically do? Keep investing in single studio acquisitions, not like a big publisher, but single studios. They could fully commit to PC day one. They could try to extend also a little into cloud, with a day one. If they go day one on PC, bring it to NVIDIA's cloud streaming or something. But it will never ever generate the same revenue jumps. And it's, unless Microsoft isn't acquiring another big publisher, I don't know, they buy an EA or so, they are not going to see the same jumps in revenue either. So I don't think it's something that Sony can actually do, right? Good question, though. Good question. Color78 New writes in. It's not really a question, it's more of a statement. I wasn't sure whether to put it in here, but let's talk about it real quick. You guys have been very inconsistent with the podcast lately. I'll stick to other shows for now.
Okay,
that's fair. It's a hobby from ours, right? It's not we're not making a living off of this. It's we both have jobs and families, and it's a hobby for us. We love to do the podcast, and we try to be consistent, but sometimes just real life comes in and takes priority. But
we also have to say, where others will happily milk the smallest and thinnest of topics to bring you a podcast every week, we would rather be consistent in the fact that if we bring you a podcast, it's on topics that are worth discussing.
Yeah.
As opposed to, there's been a minor update for a game that we've already spoke about the week before. Nothing's really changed. It brings back the day when Microsoft was going through the acquisition of Activision, and there really wasn't any updates on the thing every week, but we had to talk about the same topic every week because there was a minor update to the acquisition process or a minor FTC thing. And everybody was doing exactly the same thing week on, week out, week in, week out. And ultimately what we'd rather do is bring you a podcast that is going to be in depth, is going to be fulled out, it's going to be fun, but it's going to be worthwhile listening to. And we're not just going to talk about the most wafer thin of topics.
Yeah.
And have to drag it out for when there's really nothing much to talk about. We have to be brutally honest. When the gaming news is absolutely dry, we don't think it's fair to be creating a podcast where we just ultimately might end up only doing a half an hour segment because there really isn't any news that week. We can talk about the most recent releases, but ultimately at the same time, there's only two of us. We've got lives and jobs, etc. We're not playing every game that's releasing every week because A, we'd be absolutely smashed broke, and B, we just don't have the time to cover every game that releases. So we can only do so much. And there's only two of us, like we say, like Boxy said, it's a hobby. We still enjoy doing the podcast, but we're not going to do a podcast if there's nothing to speak about, and we'd rather be honest.
Yeah.
So if you listen, thank you very much. If you choose not to listen to us going forward, thank you for listening to us in the past, and we hope you come back in the future. We ultimately hope that gaming news starts getting a little bit more active going forward so we can be more consistent.
Yeah.
But we'd rather bring you a good podcast that has good things to talk about than an okay podcast that really tries to stretch out the most bare bones of news.
Yeah. Totally agree. All right. The Big Bridge writes in. You have to. It's a little longer one, but it's a good one. Okay. So there appears before you an immortal ancient dragon whose tears can save humanity from a plague that will drive it into extinction. Oddly, the dragon is a colossal nerd and wants to play a video game. Humanity is on the brink, but it cannot be helped. You gallantly dive into your video game library and pick out one video game, a single chance that will make it weep and save the human race. What game will that be? Choose wisely, brave warrior.
A game that will save the human race?
The one game that calms the dragon, wipes away his tears, and keeps him busy. The Witcher 3, obviously, man. Obviously.
Don't you kill dragons in The Witcher 3?
No, you don't kill dragons.
I'm sure there's one thing where you kill the dragon.
Nah, it's not. It's a wyvern. It's not a wyvern. I don't know how to pronounce it properly in English, but it's not a dragon.
Is there any? Wait, what was that? What was that game where you used to be able to fly on dragons years ago?
Oh, there have been plenty. You could fly a dragon in Skyrim.
Yes, of course. Of course, yeah. But you also kill a lot of dragons in Skyrim.
Yeah, I wouldn't give that to dragon. Great game though, but I wouldn't give that to a dragon.
It was a game years ago. What I've forgotten the name. Panzer Dragoon. There we go.
Oh yeah.
At least you can feel like a big badass dragon that has awesome combat.
Yeah. But I mean, he is a dragon. He knows how it feels to be a dragon, but he doesn't know how it feels to be a witcher. So
yeah, but at least he can go, oh, now I can be a dragon and do the things that I don't normally do in this and fly around in space against these giant monsters and shit like that and Panzer Dragoon. So
he could just try that in real life.
He could.
Tough question,
he wants a game that's going to calm him and he's going to be able to do things. That's a game where he isn't being killed or attacked and not being a slave, and he is.
I get your point. Since we talked about it earlier, we could give him the Mass Effect Legendary Edition.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. Could calm him.
That could calm him. Yeah. BT Maverick writes in, this is going to be my first Dragon Age game ever. Are there any basic do's and don'ts with the series? Thank you guys. Love the podcast. So, no, I wouldn't say that there are any do's and don'ts. From what I've played so far from Dragon Age Veilguard, you can totally easily get into the game and understand the lore and the story and everything without having played any of the other Dragon Age games. So you're good on that end. And gameplay-wise, honestly, it's RPG standards. I recommend looking around in the environments. There are a lot of secret hidden treasures you find along the way. So look around the corners. Stuff like that, but other than that, just tinker around. The game lets you respec your skill tree. Try figuring out what works for you. The only thing you cannot do is change your class. So when you go mage, you're stuck with mage for the rest of the game, or when you go warrior, you're warrior for the rest of the game. But other than that, the game lets you play it how you want to play, and just have fun with it. It is a fantastic game, man. So let me know in how you do end up enjoying Dragon Age once you've played. AGT Galaforce writes in. He says, I'm previously known as the Epirist. Yeah. See, that's how I knew that he has changed his name. I need to get used to the new one, though. He said, FOMO led me yesterday to pre-order and buy Dragon Age. Great choice. Have you ever pre-ordered and bought a game last minute because of FOMO? One that you had no interest in buying before the FOMO set in? And if so, what games? Here's a part 2 question. What is the trigger for your FOMO? Is it reviews, launch videos, influencers, Metacritic scores, etc.?
No, the trigger's always just seeing every one of my friends playing it. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking,
same for me.
oh.
I don't care. Like Metaphor, right? Every got great reviews. The influencers are out there. It's like everyone, but I just don't have an interest in it because of that. Now, and I don't see any of my friends play it either. Not many. I've seen very few for brief time posting about it on Twitter, but nothing. But if FOMO hits me, it's because everyone that I consider friend, that I interact with on the socials and so on, plays a game, and then FOMO hits me. For me, it was Elden Ring. Elden Ring is one that comes to mind where I really
for me.
Yeah,
I wasn't really thinking about picking it up, and then seeing everybody playing it, and I said it was a different kind of experience than Dark Souls. It was a bit more open, and because it was a bit more open, and I had a little bit more room to dive out the way and do things, I thought, you know what it is, I'm going to actually dive in on this. I'm going to get into the Dark Souls FOMO here with Elden Ring. I think it was the last time I went in for FOMO reasons.
Yeah. Other than that, over recent years, I usually many of the games that I just buy many games, you know. So anyway, great question though. Delroy writes in and says, "I'd be interested to know if either of you still game with friends in person or with your family. Would you go on arcade or LAN parties if they were available? I miss gaming in this way. Last time I did was It Takes Two with my wife."
No is the ultimate question, because I've got like one friend that games a little bit more as what you would class as a hardcore player, but no, not in person. It's a bit different in person. We always end up doing other things because we haven't seen each other for a while, and we usually game online together anyway. So that's something that we don't do when we're in person. It's rather have an actual catch up in person, or go somewhere or do something, and then we'll game online. So no is the answer to that. As much as I enjoyed couch co-op and things like that years ago, the rise of online has reduced the necessity to play couch co-op games these days.
So for me, it's a little different. It's not because I have little kids, right?
Yeah.
I play with them, of course, couch co-op, and I love it. We're playing through Rayman again as of late.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely loving it to play that game with my boys on the couch. Fantastic game. But yeah, so I of course do couch co-op with them, but I also occasionally, it's not like back in the days where we met 4 times a week with friends to play video games on the couch, but occasionally we do it. That I have a couple of friends come over, we have a couple of beers and order pizza, and then just go nuts with a good couch co-op game. What I haven't done in many years is a LAN party. But I would love to do one again. Honestly, getting like 10 people cramped up in the basement, you know, and then just go nuts for a weekend or so. I would love to do that again, but that's definitely something we are not doing anymore. But the couch co-op thing, definitely. Yeah, great question. Thank you. And I think that is all for this week.
Indeed.
And that brings us to an end of this week's World of Gaming. So I want to shout out everyone who watched this episode live here with us. It's always fantastic to see such a great community, so many great gamers that just do enjoy gaming, the talk about gaming, and engage with us here on this podcast. So big shout out to you and a big thank you for tuning in, and of course a big shout out to everyone who listened after the fact, whether it's here on YouTube or on one of the podcast services like Spotify or Apple Podcast. We do hope that we will be able to upload this week because last week we had technical issues. Anyway, again, a big thank you. It's been a blast, Dutch. So let everyone know what you've coming up and where they can find you.
Yes. I might stream over the weekend, make up for the fact that this podcast died a death on my end. Thanks to a blue screen. But yeah, other than that, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're back again next week, and there's been some news again when it comes to gaming, and we podcast as usual. Usually, probably back to regular day Thursday. Yeah. This week, of course, it was Halloween, so you had the kids' party, so just moved it on one day. Doesn't hurt.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but other than that, we'd love to be consistent. We want to be consistent, but the problem is news isn't. So we can only go by what's on in the news. Hopefully there is a bit more news again next week, and we can return to yourselves with an awesome podcast again next week.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
Yeah, we hope we will do that. Usually we do if there's something worthy talking about. I expect that to be the case next week, especially with the console launching next week, right?
Yeah.
Other than that, I think that's all for this week. Thanks again for listening and tuning in. We see you next week, and don't forget to game on.